What is up, everybody? So today we have a super duper interesting question coming off the heels of not having anything to talk about. We have a very interesting thing to talk about. And so once again, I kind of simplified this because the question was very in depth, which is very appreciated, but it wouldn't fit on the screen. So basically, it's like, how do I change an internal belief? Like, what's the process of actually doing that? Because obviously, when we like, if we have an internal belief and we try and change it, it typically just goes like, okay, that's stupid, brain, stop thinking that. And then it's like, you're stupid, and then it just keeps thinking the thing that it wants to think. So we're gonna talk about how to not do that. How psychologically can we actually like break down the process of actually changing our beliefs. Um, so I so let's see here. So the first thing to understand, so things to understand. First thing to understand is mind is always logical. And what do I mean by this? That's impossible. Kanato, people are stupid, so how could everyone be logical? Okay, so like we have a real problem in debating culture and society as a whole. We have a real problem with calling with saying that just because things have a logic to them that they are logical. Like logical doesn't mean correct. Like logical doesn't mean factual. Like logical and factual are like two things that can be completely opposed to one another. So like logical like let's think about it this way. So like I go up I pull up a statistic that's like looks up how many bunny owners have like died by the age of 110, and it's all of them. And then I could point to a statistic and tell you, see, bunnies prevent you from living past 110. Now that statement has a logic to it, but it is not correct. Like, does that make sense? Like it's logical because it has a transmissible type of logic and understanding to it, but it doesn't mean that it's correct. And this is what our mind is. So like even if your mind is incorrect about something, you need to understand that your mind is never just stupid typically. Like I'm trying to think of examples where someone could just be that stupid, but like that's really like if you're actually like bottom level IQ, but most people are of average intelligence. And so basically, mind is always logical, so you need to think about its you need to think about like what purpose is it serving? And what emotion does this belief quote unquote conveniently protect me from? So like this is what I mean. So like the brain will do this really tricky thing where it will, if you have an emotion that you really want to avoid, your brain will do this handy dandy little thing and it will come up with a justification for quite literally any course of action you could ever take. So like um I'm trying to debate whether we should just move into the next part to explain that. Um so yeah, like so think about it this way. So like what's an example we can use of a belief that is like like it has a logic to it, but it doesn't really track with reality. So like So like someone who is studying for a test tells you, I don't really give a shit about passing my test. Like, and so like clearly what they're doing and what they are feeling contradict one another. And so you have to be thinking, like, why would my brain think that sort of thing? It's because it wants to protect you from the thing. A big example, I really love it. Dr. K uses this example all the time. Check him out, Healthy Gamer. But I love the way that he puts it. So his example is that like a person will chase after a girl and then get rejected, and then they will rationalize it later with, I never really even cared about asking them out anyway. Like like they'll say all these things that are bad about them because, and like the brain will like believe it too. Like on a conscious level, most of these things, it's not like, oh, well, deep down I know. Well, like that's the point. It's deep down. Like consciously, you actually are like, oh, that was stupid of me to chase after them. I was actually not even interested in the first place. Like a lot of people who are in denial, like actual denial, like don't actually know that they're in denial. They may know it like subconsciously or unconsciously, but they don't know it consciously most of the time. Denial is kind of its own thing. It's not the same as like you're lying about something. Like it's like we have like psychology denial and like society denial. So like if you deny something and it's like the society definition, it's kind of like you went to this concert and then I don't want to get caught, so I'm like, no, I didn't. And that's like denying it. Like I know that it's wrong. But when we talk about denial, it's because the brain will literally protect itself from confronting an emotion by actually making you believe the logic that it comes up with. And so when you understand this, you need to understand that your brain isn't just being stupid just because you can't understand the thought process. So like just because the mind seems contradictory, there is always a line of reasoning that when you find it will track with all of your behaviors. So if you just are out here being like, I don't know why I do certain behaviors, that it doesn't make sense, I'm just that stupid, then I would really suggest you like look into why your beliefs are the way they are and what that protects you from. Like if you believe that like all women are out to get you, then like how does that protect you? It protects you because you don't have to deal with rejection, like that sort of thought process. So now we come to should this go in this category or no, you know what? That's just going to be the only thing that we need to really understand, really. So I'm just going to put this in a box here. So now, how to change internal belief. So just knowing that the brain is always logical is a very, very helpful tool, but it's kind of incomplete when it comes to like the process of actually doing it. So what you need to do is you need to go back and, like we've talked about in past streams, figure out when did I learn this lesson? So you need to figure out, like, this is what therapy kind of does, is it helps you kind of find that emotional energy. And sometimes our brain does this subconsciously for us. So sometimes we'll have a thought and then it will kind of supply us with a memory that is relevant. So like if we feel an emotion that's like abandoned, you'll notice that your brain will start thinking of times you were abandoned. And so the first thing you need to do is you need to go to the root. Understand, because all of this is not going to be able to be adequately confronted unless you really understand the root cause of like, when was the event? What is the combatant in this scenario? When did I learn that this was fact? Because what we need to do is we need to create an experience that overpowers the immense logic of the initial incident of you learning the thing. So that's the first and foremost, got to figure out, when did I learn that lesson? And simultaneously, what did that belief protect you from back then? So one of the most confusing ones when it comes to this sort of thing, oh, hey, what's up? Yeah, welcome to the stream. So we're just breaking down how to change an internal belief. First thing we mentioned, mind is always logical. Even if you think that it's being stupid, it's always got a plan. It may not be right, but logical and correct are two different things. So you got to find the logic of your brain and be like, what does this belief protect me from? Then you got to dive back into your past and you got to find, when did I learn this lesson? Like, when was I taught that I'm a low value human? And like, what does learning that protect me from? So like, a lot of people get confused about low self-esteem. And like, they're like, what purpose could low self-esteem possibly serve in my life? It is a complete net negative when it comes to me living my life in a good way. And like, so I can't speak for everyone who has low self-esteem. I think there's a lot of reasons to adaptively not have a very high self-esteem. But like, a big thing I can think of is that like, if you have low self-esteem, it protects you from the hope that gets shattered when you get rejected. So like, if you already believe that you're not worth anything, then it hurts a lot less when people leave you. You'll see this a lot in people who form relationships and then like, even though they're scared of abandonment, they'll abandon other people. And it's like, why does that make sense? It's like, because if I'm the one doing it, then I can claim to have no hope that this works out. It's under, a lot of people simplify it to like, I need to control my situation. And that's not entirely incorrect. That makes a lot of sense in general, but like you have to think even deeper than that. You have to understand, like, it's not just a lack of control, because you might be okay with not having control in other dimensions of your life. It's really about the fact that you're more comfortable with rejection than dealing with the fear of rejection. And so if your brain tells you that you weren't treated that you're already worth leaving, then it's not surprising anymore. You can expect it. You can blunt the force of it by making sure that you see it coming. This is why people become adaptive pessimists. So like, people will see bad things coming because it's easier when those bad things come along if we saw it coming in the first place. Yeah, exactly. You quit before rejection happens. That make like, exactly. So like because like, people don't get this, but like, when you get rejected, like, there's two types of rejections. We think of rejection as just losing a thing or a person, but rejection is not all rejections are equal. So like, if a person who is self-confident gets rejected, like if they're subtly self-confident, like if they're not entirely self-confident, like, because truly self-confident people would be able to handle rejection. So let me rephrase that. So like, people who have an amount of confidence to lose will get rejected, and it will hurt more because they also have to grieve the loss of the hope that they had. Whereas people who relinquish their hope before the rejection don't have to deal with the rejection and the relinquishing of the hope at the same time. So it's very important to acknowledge that like, not all rejections are made equal. Like, there's rejections where you lose the person and the hope, and there's rejections where you just lose the thing, the person. And And so like people who do this think that they're stupid or that they're like uncontrollable because they leave people before they have a chance to reject them. But it's instead them seeing a pattern and then protecting themselves against it. So, and also if anyone has any questions as we go on, just let me know. And so next thing is, so like, first off, you got to find the root of it, because essentially we got to find the root and then we got to relate it to this, which is it's always logical. So find out the reason why it's good for you to believe that, even if it's a negative emotion, because people tend to think, no, there's no reason my brain would feel a negative emotion, because if it really cared about me, it would just feel positive emotions. No, that doesn't protect you from danger. Like, positive emotions don't protect you from danger. Your brain's more equipped to be a survivor than it is to be happy. So it actually is adaptive that it would protect you rather than care about your feelings. So now we're going to start getting into like actually, we're going to get into ways, more ways you can do this now, because we've kind of talked about that stuff. So there's this therapy technique that I really like, from dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT. I haven't like fact checked myself in terms of like acronyms and stuff. I know one time for antisocial personality disorder, I used the wrong acronym. So if this is not how you spell this or whatever, then like I'm sorry about that. I can't help it right now because I don't feel like looking it up. But like there's this really cool thing in dialectical behavioral therapy that helps a lot of people who have like things like people who have like borderline personality disorder, a lot of people with anxiety, and a lot of people with low self-esteem. This technique seems to really help them with this sort of thing. And so what I want you to do is, typically there's a thing that happens. I'm just trying to draw a good circle. Thing that happened and your belief about it. And all dialectical behavioral therapy asks that you do is that you simply separate these two things out. It's not telling you to tell you that one of them is wrong and one of them is right. It's just important to gain awareness, and this is sort of a mindfulness tactic, because mindfulness, if you're aware of a thing, it has less control. It's less automatic. That's how habits work. And so the same works for the mind. If you're aware of something in the mind, it reduces its power. It's not enough to just be like, oh, look, I'm depressed. It's like it's more accurate to be like, oh, look, my mind is sending me depressed signals, like that sort of thing. So like, in order to do this, you need to separate it out into two separate things. Thing that happened and how my mind colors it. So this is also something Dr. K talks about. I really like his stuff. He's where I learned a lot of this stuff from. I would definitely recommend checking this out, but I also do my own personal research and I have my own perceptions on this sort of stuff. But like so dialectical behavioral therapy has this tactic where essentially you want to Dragon Ball T. So like what you want to do is you want to take the thing that, because typically we think like, okay, so like this person looked at me, like this person looked at me and they didn't smile. And so what the brain of a very anxious person will do is that they won't even separate out these two things, which means that their perception becomes reality. And so think about this. So like, if someone looks at me and they don't smile, there are objectively a million reasons why someone could not be smiling at me. But like my brain will perceive it as a negative signal, which means that my understanding of why they didn't smile at me is because they're like disappointed in me, or they don't like me, or some of these things. And so someone in this sort of state of mind, understand that your brain's like, oh, look, they don't like me. Like, it jumps straight to not even, like, it doesn't even think about the thing. It's like, oh, look, they don't like me. That is direct proof that they don't like me. And this is the type of stuff people will call proof. Like, and then all I ask you to do is you break it down into two separate things. And the thing is, I don't even need you to invalidate your own feelings by saying, see, your coloring of it is stupid and you're dumb. What I want you to do instead is I want you to just take the two things and say, okay, this thing happened, and then my mind said this. And that is so unbelievably important in this process. So you need to understand that. So yeah. So just understand, and so understand the coloring of it, and then also deep dive into your mind's coloring of it, and say why, or what does this belief protect me from? So, like, what does this belief protect you from? So once you've separated them out and acknowledged that there's a thing that happened, like an objective thing. The thing that objectively happened was not they frowned at you because they don't like you. The thing that happened was that they frowned at you. That is what's observable. That's what's scientific. And then your mind, as a separate process, interpreted the signal. And then you need to separate that and then use the techniques we've been talking about here and understand why does that coloring protect me? So like in this instance, it's like they frowned at me because they don't like me. And then your brain will think that, and if you think about it, I can't speak for every person, but like, you know, a reason why it's good to constantly think, oh, this person did this because they don't like me. Oh, this person did this because they don't like me, is because once again, protects you from the hope, protects you from the loss you're going to feel when in your mind, inevitable rejection happens. So that's really important to understand. So that's a really important concept. Next thing that's very simple, easier said than done. That's why I'm going to say this is a very powerful thing to do, but it's not like a prescribed thing to do in the sense that like, I don't think it's very easy to do this sort of thing because of exposure therapy reasons, because of cognitive biases stopping you from taking certain actions, or just availability of the thing. I think this is something that requires the outside world in order to do. So if you can do this, then it'll be great for you. But if you can't do this, then no sweat. Like the other things in my mind are more actionable in the moment. Because you can do the rest by yourself. But the other thing is just experience the opposite. So like this sounds easier said than done. This is why I'm like, I'm not going to spend much time on this, because I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh yeah, I would if I could. I would experience not getting rejected if people stopped rejecting me. Like I get why this could be like a very emotional thing to bring up, but like it's important to understand like people who have things like borderline personality disorder, the rate of them getting better simply with a stable relationship is like crazy. And then like the people who have abandonment issues, same with them. And then there's a lot of overlap between borderline personality disorder and abandonment issues. It's kind of like a very correlated thing. But it's not like every person who has whatever. Like, so like if we think about like this is kind of a weird example to talk about, but like if you actually look at how people become less racist it's like actually has nothing to do with like telling them statistics and arguments and debating them and then or calling them out on Twitter or whatever. What actually makes people less racist is like meeting people of the race that they're prejudiced against and just understanding through experience that they're just like a normal person. Like that's like actually what works for people who are very sheltered or grow up in a very prejudiced environment. Is that just like the experience just helps them. Like I truly do think, like, this might be a controversial statement. I truly think that like racism is like it's about ignorance. It's not about, and I know a lot of people agree with that. We even use that in our language, but like it's, you know, it's like their brain saying like, oh, I've only all I know about this group of people is that like they're bad. And then so your brain's obviously going to try and protect you. And it, you know, I don't think racism is right, but I'm saying, like, once again, the belief has a logic to it. The person isn't just stupid. They're uninformed, but they're not stupid. Like, they're not inherently lower IQ. Like, well, yeah, exactly. Like if you like there's a lot of reasons for why someone it's beneficial for their mind to be racist, because it can deflect a lot of blame. It to them is a survival mechanism. But what really gets people to just turn around is when they just have conversations with people from a different race, and they just kind of like in a funny but simple way, they just kind of realize like, oh, this person's just a normal person. Like, it's just like they're just like a chill person. So, like, you know, whatever. Because, you know, they're taught all these like things that just like are like factually incorrect, and then like they meet people and it's just like, I don't know why I'm scared of like normal people. um but yeah, so, and obviously I'm not going to spend too much time on this one, but like I just want to give you an example. So like experiencing the opposite, especially for a lot of mental disorders, is really adaptive, and it's very not adaptive. It's very beneficial in the long term. It increases remission rates of mental disorders, just to simply have the opposite happen, so the brain can take in new data. Um, because once again, like it's important to acknowledge. In fact, I'm gonna highlight this. So like your brain is a computer. So like if your brain, let's say your brain like is a computer, so like it takes in data and then forms conclusions. So like if all this computer has ever seen is that I flip tails 5 times on a coin, the brain's conclusion will be that coins only flip tails. So like you can see, and so like people will have a life where they've spent their entire life flipping tails, like they've just had like a really bad life in general, and then like they will like beat themselves up because they're pessimistic. And it's like, you have to understand that like your brain is logical in the sense that sometimes it can hurt you more than it helps you, but like your brain just knows how to interpret data that it has. And this is what's so hard about changing your beliefs. So like if you flip tails 5 times and then you say, hey brain, we should flip again, maybe it's heads, your head's just gonna tell you, no, that's just stupid. Like that's just dumb. And so like you have to understand that, like, but like we also, even though we can understand why this computer came to this conclusion, we also simultaneously understand intuitively why this is incorrect, because we have different data than it. So like that's why experiencing the opposite is so important, because it gives your computer brain more information. But it actually is possible to change your beliefs without acquiring new information. So that's like important to acknowledge. But I do think it's important to acknowledge that like your brain is just going to act on the data that it has. One moment, I'm going to read this question. Here's a question. Is trying to change someone's worldview, for example, someone who believes that the earth is flat, worth it? Or is it better to just acknowledge that everyone in the world has different views and accept it? Excellent question. Excellent question. So I really like this question because it highlights kind of the mentality that we go into debates with. So like so we don't we have lost the art of like having a conversation for the sake of gaining new information or insight. So like think about it. Like how productive do you think a conversation this computer could have with me is if the computer went into if I went into the conversation trying to convince the computer that even though all it's ever known is tails, that they're wrong, and like no, it can flip heads actually. How likely do you think it is that the computer is going to listen to me when it comes in with all this data right here, like tails, it flipped tails 5 times? Like, think about it. Like, how likely is it to listen to what I'm saying and actually hear my argument if it's coming in with the goal of not listening, convincing me or changing my belief because it's got all this data, and for both of our point of views, we're obviously right. So to say this is, I'm not saying that people aren't right and people aren't wrong. I'm saying that like we fundamentally reach a roadblock because in trying to change someone's mind, you are cutting off the part of your brain that will actually take in new information and appraise it on a fair level, because you already have the ego that you are correct, and you could be. And that's the really, really tricky thing, is you still need to watch out for your ego even when it's actually factual and correct. So like what I would suggest for having a conversation with someone, I'm going to make this like its own separate little category because I think this is such a good question. How to convince someone. So we can convince someone. So first thing you need to do is the hardest step. Stop trying to convince them. Okay, so that's like the hardest thing, is because some people are bigots and some people are like you're gonna perceive them as idiots. But like and you've got all this data and they've got all their data, and all we're doing is like throwing data at each other without like comparing it. Like it's like a snowball fight of information. And so like what you need to do instead is like, this sounds like such like hippy dippy BS, but like genuinely, I found this to be very effective when I disagree with people. And then like, cause I used to be a person who would debate politics all the time. I was extremely involved in politics. I used to look up data and statistics and watch like videos and all this sort of stuff just so I could be prepared for debates. And then I never changed anyone's mind ever. And and then now I've stopped trying to change people's minds, and they actually listen to me. And so I feel like this is very important to acknowledge. So like, just simply ask them questions. So this is the thing, is our brain will tell us, don't ask them questions. You already know why they're an idiot. But like, that's the thing, is that if you think that the explanation for why someone believes something is that they are simply just less intelligent than you, then you are probably the one with the cognitive bias. So like, when I go into a conversation, I don't assume that I'm correct. Like, I acknowledge that I have a belief that I am correct, but I go in genuinely being like, okay, I want to like, if nothing else, if I can't convince them, I want to come out of this understanding actually why they believe what they believe, and assuming that like they're not an evil person inherently. So like, what you want to do is you want to ask them questions and reflect their statements in a non-sarcastic way. think about this. Like, think about if like you said a belief and then someone responded to you with like, actually, that's wrong, because like, think about the alarm bells that sets off in your brain. Think about how defensive you'd get. So like, what you want to do is like, if someone told me that, like, because I believe that the earth is round. So like, if someone came up to me and they were a flat earther, and I wouldn't say, how could you not believe this? There's all this evidence and everything, because trust me, they have a million explanations for why you're wrong about all this sort of stuff. And so what you want to do is you want to ask them questions. And so you want to say like, so I understand that you think the earth is the earth is flat. Tell me how you understand that. And then like, they'll explain to you, and then they'll just be like, well, yeah, it's a big government conspiracy. And then it's just like, and it's a big government conspiracy, and everything that you think is science and stuff, they're all controlled by like these organizations and everything. And then say like, okay, so I just want to make sure I'm hearing you right. And like, this is the problem. A lot of people will take this step and they'll get sarcastic, and the other person will pick up on that, and it'll be the same as you being attacking them. So you genuinely, from a place of understanding, even if the argument sounds so stupid to you that no one could ever believe it, you want to ask them like, okay, so let me just make sure I get this straight. So your belief is that there is a government, there is like a governmental cover up to convince us that the earth is round. And so because they have such large power in our society, will then use that power in order to kind of hold subsidizing for like research facilities hostage until they are given until they admit that the earth is flat, or they propagate this belief. And then like, let's say they say like, yes, that's exactly what I believe. And then like, ask them genuinely, be like, okay, why would they? So like, I'm a little confused. Like, and you can even, this is the beautiful thing, is that like, you don't have to be like, see, that doesn't make sense, because no, say, so I'm a little confused because to me, it seems a little contradictory in my mind. So I'm just trying to understand. So like, in my mind, I don't get why the government would even want to like do something like that. Like, why would they spend all these resources to convince you of this thing? And then like, they'll explain and be like, and like, here's the beautiful thing, is that if you can actually do this and you cannot be sarcastic and you were not condescending, just like, okay, but like, why would they do that? Like, literally, why would they? No, like, from a completely serious and genuine place of compassion, understand that this is a person with a working brain who likely does not have that much of a lower IQ than you, and ask them like, how did you come to understand that? And then don't even share your information yet. Just like, ask them like, okay, so like, how do you understand that? And the beautiful thing about this is that like, if they're wrong, or if their logic doesn't track, even if they don't admit it to you because of ego reasons, they'll slowly start to realize why their logic kind of doesn't hold up. So you can just ask them questions. Just be like, where did you get this information? And then they'll be like, well, I got it on a Facebook group, but like, like, the reason that it's not propagated by science and why that sounds bad is because like, they've taken over all of the facilities and stuff. And like, and then if you really find something that like phrase all your rebuttals like genuine questions. Like, I wouldn't be like, okay, but that doesn't make sense, because what about the private research facilities that get private funding? Like, why, like, how are they part of this mixture? Like, instead say like, okay, that makes sense. Like, they're like, if they were subsidizing all of the research facilities, it makes sense that like, why they need to go to Facebook in order to like get the truth out. But like, where I'm a little confused is that like, that would see, I even have to watch my language, because like, I'm almost leaning into judgment. So I really have to be careful with my language right here. So I'm trying to think of how I'd respond to this. So I'd be like, see, I'm a little confused because to my knowledge, it was my understanding that there's private research organizations that aren't funded or controlled by the government. They're actually like either for profit, or they're like, or they get like donations and everything like that. And so like in order for that to like, they'd have to cut off everything or threaten them in some sort of way. And so just literally like phrase everything like a question and seek to genuinely understand what they're going at. And then um and then they will, and then if faulty, that's terrible, faulty logic, they will realize. So I wouldn't say to just like so I would accept for like your own peace of mind that like people, like, you can't control whether you change someone's belief or not, but you can change the likelihood that you can. In the same way that like I can't control how many times I roll a 6 in my lifetime, but I can change how many times I roll a dice. Like, in that sort of way, you can influence your likelihood. And I truly think that, like, I thought this was kind of BS when it came out, because I was just like, okay, but like, how am I supposed to pretend that I think like a flat earther is right? And the truth is that like, yeah, like question them until they start questioning themselves. And I think a lot of people know this, and because even people who like debating will learn this and then they'll weaponize it and it will lose all of its meaning. So a lot of people who like debating will be like, oh, okay, so all I have to do is keep asking them questions and then they'll realize how stupid they are. And then this manifests in questions that are passive aggressive. So an example of a passive aggressive question is like, don't you think? Like, they'll start off questions with like, well, don't you think that? And then like, what does that send to the person? Because they are setting the momentum of the conversation in a direction that feels like they are pushing against you. Sense for when your arguments are like attacking. And don't attack their arguments. Literally just keep asking them questions, but not in these passive aggressive sort of ways. So if they do the same tactic, then that's great. That means that they're willing to listen to you. So like, I would say take turns. Like I would say so like if you asked me like, why do you think the earth is round? I'd be like, okay, so I think that the earth is round because like, in my experience, there's a lot of scientific logic that tracks with other science that makes sense of why this would need to be this way for everything to work the way it does. I think that satellite engineering has gone a long way. I think that there's a lot of scientific research behind it, and I've heard people talk about like a government cover-up, but I think that science is so expansive and isolated at times that it's really hard to convince me that the government is somehow controlling all of the people who do independent research and find this sort of data. And then they would ask me like, and then they'd ask me a question if they were actually not being passive aggressive. Then they'd ask me a question like, okay, so like you kind of think that like, because there's a lot of private research and all that stuff, and it's just like, what do you so like if you value that sort of stuff, what's not acceptable about like the way that like flat earthers conduct their research? And I'd be like good question. So like I think that, and then the conversation, let's see, it would be a productive discussion now, each side sharing information instead of throwing like, yeah, exactly. Like if they if we can get the world to start talking like this, like people will just will genuinely understand each other. Because the reason people feel like they're more disconnected from reality is because like people are working with different sets of data. So, like my Twitter feed will give me different information than yours. And so like you come to me with a belief that just sounds insane to me because I've never heard it before. And then I attack you for it. And then I never seek to understand why you learned it. But like if we actually just sat down like adults and compared this sort of stuff, then I could just be like, oh, where did you hear that? And it's just like an article. It's like, oh, cool. Could you send that to me? And then I'm just like, hey, it looks like this article isn't very like it's not done by like experts. It's just done by random people. What do you think about that? And then like, not just like, hey, look, this isn't done by professional researchers. Gotcha. That's what I used to do all the time. It never worked. It literally just made the person more angry and made them less likely to agree with me. Like, genuinely ask them, just like, okay, like what, like, what do you think of that? And stuff. And if they come up with an excuse, you can think in your mind like, oh, that's bullshit, like whatever. But like seriously, like then just be like, okay, so like in my mind, that's kind of like the hallmark of like something that we shouldn't trust on the internet. So like, can you tell me like, okay, like, so I don't want to come off as judgmental. I just like, that's typically like my line. So I'm curious why you still believe it if it's not by like someone who's qualified in the field and stuff. And then seriously, if there is a thing that you think is contradictory, like if you have a belief that contradicts theirs, it is so easy when you get used to it to phrase all of your attacks as genuine questions. So like if someone believes the earth is flat, actually ask them. Don't be like, don't you think this? Or why don't you think this? Or like, oh, but look at all this data. Nah. Like, why don't you believe me? Yeah. Like, I'm making fun of the round earther because this is how we talk. We're like, why don't you believe me? Does that mean I'm wrong? Like, seriously, just actually tell them, like say like, hey, I'm confused. Like, I thought that this was obvious. And so I'm like, there's like a big disconnect between what you believe and what I've been brought up to believe is like factual. So like, I'm just trying to genuinely understand how you came to that conclusion. Cause to me, this sort of stuff's like obvious. So it's really fascinating that like, there's someone who like thinks that there's the opposite. And so like a lot of this stuff might sound disingenuous and stuff, but like, it'll be weird at first. Someone might point out like I truly don't think people will point this out that often. I used to be a huge debater, and then I started talking like this, and not many people like actually pointed it out or like was like, that's weird that you're talking like that, because like this is just how human beings should talk to each other. Like, you know, if you get used to talking like this, then the person will also just like know that like, oh, that's just how they have conversations. So I hope that answers your question. Is just that like it's a very hard thing to do because like we're brought up to like hate these people and think that like ignorance is like the cause of so much like violence in the world, which is true. So it's really hard to stand by and let people be ignorant when it's causing so many bad things in the world. But like, if you want to convince someone, let go of convincing them and just genuinely try to understand their argument. And the more you understand their argument, they will slowly understand their argument. And if that doesn't work, then, you know, like you tried. But like this is like scientifically the best way to like get people to listen is to like use active listening and then present your information in a non-confrontational way. Because like conversations don't have to be a zero-sum game. It doesn't have to be like either I'm right or you're right, or I'm wrong or you're wrong. Like one of us has to lose. Like instead, we can just have different information. And then if we come together to collaborate, it doesn't matter if your side of the fence tended to be correct. If we weren't arguing about it and we were genuinely just sharing information and comparing it, then it's like we're just scientists, you know? It's like we're just trying to figure this out together. So like the only reason there's ego attached to it is because you come in with this attitude of like, I need to win. And I need to show them how stupid they are. It's going to feel so good to have this mic drop moment where I present this study in front of them and I'm like, boom. Get wrecked. It's just not, as someone who did that for years, it's not productive. I truly think that like I've had, and you know, like people still don't change my mind a lot, but like what I've noticed is that like we can genuinely come to a conclusion that's satisfying for both of us. So like an example would be like, okay, I understand that you think that the earth is flat because of this and everything like that. I've noticed that like you really value the safety that comes with like assuming that the government is like, you know, doing this thing. And I know you'd rather be safe than sorry. That makes a lot of sense to me. I'm more on the side of the fence that like, because that's just not an ingrained belief of mine. I just don't believe that the earth is flat. I don't see enough intense evidence for it, at least that goes in line with my way that I appraise science. I don't really feel your sense of urgency or your sense of skepticism. But like I can understand why you're so skeptical, and like I think it's okay for you to be skeptical. And like I think skepticism is like a healthy thing to do, even if like I don't really agree with the science. I think it's like okay to disagree, because like we need to have different opinions in this world. And then like they can just be like, okay, like, and just take solace in the fact that like by doing that, you gave them every opportunity. Because trust me, as someone who used to be a debater, nothing is more off-putting than someone going on stream or a call or something and just saying like, if anyone believes the opposite, they're stupid. That has never gotten anyone to be like, oh, well, I don't want to be stupid. No, like I'm sure it has. I'm just not thinking of an example, but like it's just like, well, I don't want to be stupid, so I got to think, I guess like virtue signaling and pressuring like that is like a way it could be happening, but there's nothing more off-putting than being told that if you believe the opposite, then like you're stupid. Because like if you because then like think about how much more science would progress and how much more society would progress if we approached every conversation with the attitude that's like, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Like, it doesn't mean that I'm stupid or that the other person gets to gloat and tell me like, oh, look at you, look at the stupid, ignorant little baby, man. Like that, like if we just get to a place where we can all actually just like exchange information and seek to genuinely understand each other, I genuinely think the world's just going to be like a way more, honestly, just less stressful place, but also genuinely like more scientifically productive, because because when there's no ego attached to it, it's not you versus me. It's you and me playing a co-op game. It turns from versus mode to co-op mode. And it's like you guys, instead of like player versus player, it's like you both versus knowledge and like misinformation. You're both combating misinformation together. And just because you were the one who got misinformation, like you're not stupid for getting misinformation. Like that's just like it happens. Like we don't know what to trust on the internet nowadays. And if you haven't been taught how to seek out the right information, then you just weren't taught. It doesn't mean that like you didn't intuit it. Like most people learn that sort of stuff. So I hope that answers your question. If you have any further things on that I think that's a fantastic question. I love that question. So next thing we need to understand, going back to how to change your internal beliefs, is understand cognitive dissonance. So like cognitive dissonance is like, so like I said that like the brain needs to have a logic to it. And like your brain has this idea of like cognitive dissonance or discord. But like essentially, so like if the mind perceives itself to be illogical, then that creates a lot of stress in the brain until it reaches a point of logic. So like a good example of this would be like, I really want to quit smoking. And then I keep smoking and I keep smoking and I can't break the habit. And then my brain, like there's going to be a lot of stress that gets created in the brain when it starts to think, I want to stop this thing, but for some reason I keep doing it. And it's like really hard for my brain to understand why it just can't get itself together. And so like a way that the brain will create cognitive dissonance is like, or reduce cognitive dissonance is to, the way that it will feel like it's in accordance with itself is it will come up with an explanation that makes sense. So like the smoker who can't stop smoking will say something like, quitting smoking is not worth the amount of health benefits I will get from not smoking. And then like they might not internally believe that. They might be terrified that they're going to die early, but like their brain will make sure that there's no contradiction. It will make it so it's like, oh, don't worry, you're right. Like that makes sense. So like, does that make sense? Like it like, and so your brain will do this with like self-esteem and things like that. So your brain will come up with explanations for why your course of behavior makes sense. So like if you really want to hang out with friends and you don't, because like you have low self-esteem, and you're like, the reality is that likely it brings up certain emotions and you want to avoid those emotions. Your rationalization of your mind, which could be true in some ways, is like, like, oh, I'm doing them a favor because like they wouldn't want to be around me anyways, or oh, they secretly hate me. Just like, do you see how like there's something that seems contradictory, and then it's a lot more. Yeah, kind of the brain making excuses. And I don't want you guys to, and like, once again, there's a purpose to this. You don't want to like be like, shut the hell up, brain. You're just making excuses, because like people who like yell at their brain for being their brain, like, how good of a success rate do they have of like actually doing anything correct? Like, they have a pretty low success rate because it's like very invalidating. And so like, you know, from a benevolent standpoint, yes, your brain's making excuses, but like kind of look at that compassionately and be like, okay, I get that this is kind of messing me up right now, but like and I get it. Like, brain, I get why you came up with this explanation, but I kind of doubt the validity of it, but I understand. And then this is a good way to tell if you have cognitive dissonance. Ask yourself, all right, let me exist right now in a world where where I'm wrong about that logic. And if you feel a welling of emotions happening, then you're probably partaking in this principle. So like, I literally did this yesterday. I'm just going to be like open and honest about my stuff. So like, this is how I process like cognitive dissonance. So like, I realized that there was like, I was thinking about stuff, and like, it was like a distressful thing to think about. And like, I realized that my mind was partaking in very black and white thinking. And I noticed that, and I did what I tell you guys to do. I engaged with it very non-judgmentally. I said like, okay, this is probably protecting me from something. So like, what is the belief? And then I won't get into the details. But like, it's like, essentially it's like, I had a belief about something, and every time I felt the welling of emotion come up, I thought, no, because this is this. And I felt that angry part of my brain. And then I thought, okay, let's pretend that part doesn't exist. Like, that part's wrong. And then I felt all these negative emotions well up, and then the guardrail came back up. And then I'm like, I caught you. I know, I figured it out. Like, you're like, and so then and then you can do this, and then you can do this. So that is what allows you to go back at the internal belief and think, okay, so now I can really critique this belief, because as long as I can sit with the emotions that it brings up and I'm not trying to avoid them, as long as I'm just aware that I am avoiding them on purpose, then I can actually appraise it and be like, okay, what is this belief protecting me from? And if I see it's protecting me from a lot, then that really gives me a silver bullet, because then I can be like, every time the brain says, no, well, this is just logical because we have all this data, and I came up with this thing I came up with this explanation to reduce cognitive dissonance. So it makes a lot of sense that I would believe that. And then also I came up with all these data points, like your computer saying, we've flipped tails 5 times. You really think it's going to flip heads the next time? Understand the data in your brain, understand that your brain's trying to protect you from something. And through understanding that your brain gets uncomfortable when it realizes that it's being illogical, you can then target the feeling, and then you can then target the feeling, and then now you have a way to have a counter argument. It's very important that I preface with counter arguments. You don't use it to tell your brain that it's stupid for thinking that. Don't tell your brain that it's dumb. You could think it's silly or something, but like, or think that it's kind of overblown or whatever, but don't get angry at your brain. Don't judge your mind for trying to protect you. And if you judge your mind for trying to protect you, then tell yourself that it's okay. Like, you need to break the cycle of judgment when it comes to this. And I'll get into that in a second. It's like there's 2 people, one who wants you to achieve the goal and the one who doesn't, but we are one and the same. Yes, exactly. This is why we people go through life and they're like, I don't get why I don't just blah blah blah. And then I'm like, you need to explore your emotions because that's the core of why you don't do certain things. And then they're like, oh no, I like to push down my emotions. And then I'm just like, well, that's why that's why you don't do anything, because your emotions are still controlling you. You just like are numb to them. Like if you're numb to pain, it doesn't mean you don't take damage. I feel like that's a huge takeaway you should take, like for everyone to take away. Like just because like you don't feel the damage happening doesn't mean your brain's not going to automatically be avoiding it. Just because you're blind to your emotions doesn't mean they don't, like, that's why the unconscious exists. That's why the subconscious exists, because like your brain will always find a way to control your behavior, even if you use all the cognitive willpower you possibly can. It's like in here, you gotta fix the stuff you're running away from in order to make progress in life. And so yeah, like that, and like having two people inside you, that creates a lot of cognitive dissonance. But you know what actually creates less cognitive dissonance? Accepting that there are two people within inside you. So understand that so this is the way I really like to look at it. A lot of people I know have gotten a lot of benefit out of this model. So like I want you to literally think of like the person that feels more stable and the person who wants to achieve things in your brain as like you know, let's take my name for example. My name's Dylan. So like I'll think of me, like one part of me as like Dylan 1. And then there's Dylan 2, who I typically think about as like a hyper defensive and emotional person. And he's not a thing I can get rid of. He's just a part of my existence. And like Dylan 2 is really looking out for my survival because he's been hurt a lot of times throughout his life. And so like every time Dylan 2 senses danger, he like throws Dylan 1 to the side and says, no, I'm taking the reins. We need to protect ourselves because we've been hurt by this thing before. And like the thing is that the problem in life is that we let one of them win. Like we don't listen to both of them. We either tell Dylan 2 that he's stupid for having fears, even though he's the one that's been hurt and like he's the one that's gone through so much pain, and like and we tell them that's not productive, Dylan. You're stupid for being scared. Or we go fully into Dylan 2 and we're like yes, I should be scared. I'm like, I have a right to be scared. I should be scared. I've been hurt throughout my entire life, and now the pain is coming up, and I give up. That's what Dylan 2 is. It's giving up. It's saying, I want to retreat. I'm done. I'm done suppressing these emotions. I want to be seen. I want to be heard. And so it's like, okay, I can have control over my life if I suppress my emotions, and I cannot have control over my life if I give in to my emotions. But like, there's a third answer that reduces cognitive dissonance, and it's truly just, this is kind of like what Carl Jung was talking about with like the shadow and the personas and everything. Like, because like that, I look at Dylan 2 as like my shadow. Like he's a part of me, but he's like the part of me that I like try to ignore. And then the most of my progress in my life has come from me looking at Dylan 2 and saying like, look, man, like I really, I understand truly that like you are hurt right now. And I understand that there's a lot of emotions that these new experiences are bringing up that are going to hurt you. And like, I'm really sorry that we need to go through more of it because you have been through so much. But just because you're scared doesn't mean you need to give into that fear. And like, it's going to feel uncomfortable and it's going to feel scary, but like, we got to go through this, man. Like we got to because we've been playing it by your book and it doesn't work. And that in itself sounds invalidating, but like, you're just telling your other self how it is. You're just like, hey man, like whenever I let you take the reins, we're safe, but we're in an area where we don't like. And I know every time I do something that you perceive as irresponsible or it's going to get us hurt, you're very intolerant of that negative emotion. And so you don't really want to go there. But like, it's so important to just understand that like Dylan too, just because he like ruins my life a little by like sheltering me, like, and he spent a lot of years in the driver's seat, and he made me like, he made me do things that I didn't consciously want to do. Like he made me do things like leave friend groups because like I was ashamed, or like he made, because it's like I like, once again coming back to the rejection thing, I don't want to deal with the hope, and so I'm just going to deal with the rejection because I'd rather get the guaranteed rejection than risk the rejection and hope happening, because that's happened too many times. And like I gave him the reins for many years, and weirdly I kind of had to do that because I then had the ability to be like, because then I like found the happy part of me, and then I pushed away Dylan too, and then that just made him grow stronger. I see us as the present and Dylan's I see us as the present and Dylan's as two past periods, a recent one and an old one. Kind of like I can definitely see that. I kind of see it more like no, I definitely actually agree with that, because like Dylan 2 was born out of the pain of the past. He's not born out of the pain of the present. Like he's a thing that got created and he's a thing that got activated that learned, when I do this I get hurt. And then whenever there's situations that open me up to hurt again, Dylan 2 comes out and says, I've seen this one before. We need to move away from it. And like, if you guys notice this, if you guys think of Dylan 2 as like a character in like a piece of media, he's not like a villain. Like he might be an antagonist depending on how you define antagonist, but like he's sympathetic. He just doesn't want to get hurt, and he's just trying to protect the whole organism from hurt. Like that's what a defense mechanism is. Like, and so the way to like get Dylan 2, yeah, maybe an anti-hero. Like it's all dependent, but like I sure as hell don't think of Dylan 2 as a villain. Like, sure, he messed up a lot of things in my life, but I think he had damn good reason to. Like, and he's part of me right now. He's like, part of him is talking to you right now about these experiences. He's giving me the information that I need to talk about these experiences. And they were really like hard. And so like and so like the thing is that like the way to get Dylan 2 to calm the hell down is to just like, you don't have to like follow what he says, but like the mind doesn't need to do everything that it understands. So like you can just tell the alternate part of yourself that like it's okay. I understand why you're doing this. It may feel invalidating that I'm not going to do what you're suggesting, but I always want you to have a voice. And sometimes I think in life you're going to be right, is the thing. I think there are things in life where I might need you. If I'm in a really dark headspace and I truly just cannot deal with the pain anymore, then like I might need you again. But right now, I want to move in this other direction in life. And I always appreciate you kind of putting the brakes on and saying like, hold on, let's make sure this is something I want to do. So now, because I've listened to you, I'm telling you, I do want to do this thing. And and I want you to prepare, because it's going to be really uncomfortable and it's going to hurt. But those are just feelings. Like that I do think that the hurt we're going to experience is worth what we're going to get out of it, or what we're going to try to get out of it. And over time, Dylan 2 still comes up and he still gets scared. But like the beautiful thing is that like he's not like a sidekick is the thing. He's like a partner. Like he's like a part of me that is like, I wouldn't be me without him. Like, who knows if I'd even be here without him? Who knows the horrors that he has protected me from? Like, so I don't know. I just think like a lot of people need to start thinking of their internal mind instead of looking at your like whatever your name is too, and then thinking to yourself like that's stupid. I hate that. Like I hate that because it can be so hard to look at a part of yourself that has caused you so much pain, both emotionally and screwed you over from doing so many different things because it held you back because it was hyperactive. But like I hate to break it to y'all, until you learn how to forgive that side of yourself, it's not going to go away. Like, if I just keep invalidating Dylan too, he's going to be there no matter what. The way you get him to be on your side is to actually look at the other part of yourself and say, okay, it's okay that we're feeling this way. Like, it's like I get why you're feeling that way, and I'm going to do something that's going to make you feel uncomfortable. Like, but it's not because I hate you and I think you're stupid for being scared of something. I get why you're scared of the thing, and I'm willing to be scared if it means we move forward with this thought process. So, geez. That was a long tangent, but like, I feel like it's important because like, I feel like everyone, even me, like, I go through, I've like people generally consider me a very mentally healthy person, but like people don't get that like 5 years ago I was like getting real therapy for the first time that wasn't just like grief counseling. Like I was getting like actual formal therapy and getting diagnosed with an extreme version of a mental disorder, and like just starting treatment. And so like people don't people don't like, to me, I would have been one of the people that just says like, oh, well, I'm not one of the lucky ones that gets to be mentally healthy. I didn't get the mentally healthy RNG. Like, because like I had been, unbeknownst to myself, very like subtly emotionally distressed in my life, and it reached a boiling point when I got to be like 20 years old. Um, and so like, and like and like this relates so much to like how I moved past that part in my life. Like that this relates so much to how I'm able to look at like to look at why how I behaved and why I behaved that way. Um so I think it's just really important, and I'm probably going to keep talking about that as we move forward with this. Um so what I need you to do is that I want you to also understand the ego. So ego is like one of my favorite topics. Ego is like a big part of ego is like Dylan too. So like it's comparative. It's a defense mechanism, and it is not actually the self. Um, so so like the ego, I'm not talking about like the Freudian type of ego. I'm not talking about like id ego, super ego. That's kind of talking about different stuff. I'm talking about more like the spiritual type of ego, like the ahamkara or the ahamkar. But like it literally means like the I, like the letter I. So like the I. So like I don't know how to describe it, but like essentially like everything in life that you can describe something with is either a statement of ego or not ego, in the sense that it's either comparative or not. So like it might be, you might think that it's impossible to describe an object without comparing it to other objects, but that's not necessarily like true. So like think about it this way. So like the way to test if this is a great test to see if like your ego is active. So like could this exist? So could this perception exist without comparison or other things of that nature existing? So like if there was a tree and a white void, if there's nothing else in the universe and there was a tree, and I said that tree is 10 feet tall, is that a statement of ego? Self-esteem is a product of the ego because it is a perception of the self. So like I'm going to explain this. So like if a tree is 10 feet tall, is that a statement of ego? No. Feet are not comparative. They're a descriptive. They measure something, but it's descriptive. There's no value or anything attached to it. And so like, but like that tree is tall. That is in a statement of ego. That is comparative because tall is a relative term. It makes the word tall makes no sense if only one thing exists. So like think about that and yourself. So like this comes a lot back to like this whole thing. So like this whole thing is the ego. So like think about what literally exists versus the value that you place on that thing. So like if because this is literally a part of your brain that activates. In spirituality, we call it the ahamkar. In science, we call it the default mode network. It's your ability to perceive things about yourself or past events and then form a narrative identity out of it. And like certain animals do have a default mode network. I think some animals don't and stuff. So like that's like there are certain, we have a unique ability to be able to we have a specific ability to be able to perceive ourselves and understand. And like a good way to test that out is like you can put like an animal in front of the mirror and see if it recognizes itself. But that's not, I think, 1-to-1. I don't think that's very scientific. I just think that's a cool thing that kind of correlates. But like essentially, so like think about it like so I could say like think about this. So like I could say like I have green eyes, which I do. So like I have green eyes. Now I could say like so that's just a fact. Like my eyes are green. Like that has no like good or badness attached to it. Now I could say like I have big lips, which is like also kind of true. And so like I kind of like when I consider my standards of attractiveness and stuff, like I don't like the fact that I have big lips. And so my brain is like, the ego part of my brain is like, that's bad. Like it's set, like there's this part of me that's like, you have ugly lips, like that sort of thing. And that's really important because like I have big lips is comparative because it requires other people to compare to. It might seem like it's logical and that it's like factual because like you could take, oh, well, I can take this many people and compare them. And it's like, you're in the upper this percentile of the, yeah, you could objectively measure it and then form that. But like the problem with that is that it requires other things to compare it to. You're not looking at the thing as it is. You are comparing it to other things. Do you guys get how that's fundamentally different? How a tree is 10 feet tall is more important than a tree being tall? Like, that's because it's a statement of ego. And so the ego is a part of the brain that activates when we are under threat of a negative emotion. So your brain will either use it to give you a big boost or to tear you down. And so the brain will so we see this a lot in like rejection. So like this is how your brain, so like any perception you have of yourself that has a value, like I'm bad, I'm good, I'm ugly, I'm handsome, I'm even like I'm good at this thing, I'm bad at this thing. Like those are inherently statements of ego because like what does that mean? Like all you did was do a thing and it resulted in you getting a trophy. That does not like good and bad are like value judgments on this sort of stuff. That's like an ego sort of thing. So think about it. So like if I get rejected, there are two types of people getting rejected. There's the ego of I never wanted her anyways. I never she's ugly. I'm way too good for her. Like all these comparative statements that are like boosting you up. That's like very full of yourself sort of stuff. That's how we typically think of ego in the West. We think of a big ego as like a thing where it's like, how highly do you think of yourself? But in spirituality, the ego is just how much you look at yourself and compare yourself. And in spirituality, the ego is always kind of a bad thing. Like the not but like even that's like a comparative statement. Like the ego just causes more mental distress than not mental distress. So like you can just look at things as they are to be purely scientific about it, but to protect you, your brain will make comparisons. So like I want you guys to think about this. So like it is protective for the brain. Notice how it protects you from the hurt when the ego goes either way. If the brain gets rejected and then it says, "Oh, I never wanted her anyways." That's protecting you because it diminishes the value of the thing you lost. And then now let's pretend I get rejected and I think, "Oh, well, I deserve to be rejected anyways." That reduces cognitive dissonance. That makes you more the world makes sense again. It's not like this unfair, unjust thing happened. That's why injustice hurts us so much, because it just doesn't make sense to us. But like, if we can be like, "Oh, well, I was expecting to get rejected because like I'm so lame," then the world makes sense. We never had hope to begin with, so it protects us from losing hope. So like, do you guys get that? So like anytime you compare yourself, it's typically very black and white. And the act of you comparing, whenever you compare yourself to anything, understand how your mind, like understand the feeling, like the raw emotion that bubbled up and how the ego protected you from feeling that feeling. So like the self-esteem, like high self-esteem, I'm assuming a very negative connotation with this because I actually don't like it when people hype themselves up, because I think that that's like a statement of ego. Is like, I prefer to just not compare myself at all. Like I prefer to just be like completely like notice what I do. So like if I do something and the internet hates it, that's not me doing a bad thing. That's me doing something and the internet hates it. I can form my own conclusions on whether or not I think it's like great question. What would having no ego be like? So like it's just noticing things for what they are and not what they're. So like, remember how we were talking about this? Like, thing happened, how my mind colors it. So like, if you got rejected with no ego, then like your brain would be like, "Oh, look at that. This person said that they don't want to hang out with me. That's interesting." And then you'd be like, is there a thing that happened that could have made them do that? And you would just inquisite into it. Because what do people with big egos do? They tunnel down into like, "Oh, it's because I'm stupid. Oh, it's because I'm dumb. It's because I'm not attractive. It's because I'm ugly." Like all this sort of stuff. But like, there are a million reasons why someone could reject you. But like, they could be in a relationship for all you know. But like, if you have no ego, your mind will purely notice objectively what happened and stop trying to protect you by coloring it in with significance. So because your brain, when it tries to do this, you'll feel the ego activate, and notice what happens when you try and get rid of the ego. It makes an ego statement, because if you accept that there's no ego, there's so much baggage that comes with accepting that you have no ego. Like, you have to deal with the pain of like, "Oh, I could have had no ego way earlier," or, "Oh my God, I went through so much suffering that wasn't necessary." And even that, it'll protect you, because it's like, "Oh no, someone like you could never have no ego." Like, think about how paradoxical that is. Like, someone like you could never that's a statement of ego. Like, who's telling you this information? Like, this is like the Bo Burnham song. Like what was it? Like, it was like it was the song Channel 5 News, and it was like it was one of his songs I don't think he ever performed in public. But like, there was a line, it was like what is the line? It's like it's like, "We're gonna go to commercial," and it's this segment, and it's about like, before we talk about obesity, we're going to go to this segment about why obesity isn't that bad. And oh, by the way, it's sponsored by Taco Bell. Like, that sort of thing. Like, you get the irony. Like, it's like, of course, Taco Bell would be like, hey, obesity's not that big a deal. In that same way, whenever you try to remove the ego, you will feel the ego lash back out like a parasite that wants to be, that like is trying to self-preserve. Because if you tell yourself that you don't want ego, of course the ego is going to want to protect itself. It's a part of the brain. So like, if you try and say like, so if you try and say like, oh, I got rejected, but like, that was just like me saying that I'm ugly is just like a perception. That's not like a thing like that. That's what my mind thinks happened. But like what objectively happened is that they just said that they didn't want to date me. I don't know the reason, but my mind's coming up with a reason. And then like your brain sees that and when you try to be objective about it, it's like, oh, look at you trying to like protect yourself. Oh, look at you trying to like you're looking, this is a big thing your brain does. It's like, oh, look at you pushing down your emotions, running away from all of the pain and all that sort of stuff. Like it'll do all these little things to make you, because then if you give into that and you feel bad about like, oh, how could I ever think that I could get rid of the ego? The way that it successfully made you feel bad is by making a comparative statement about you. Like, you're ugly, or you don't deserve to have an ego. Like, I mean, you deserve the pain of having an ego and all this sort of stuff. Like, notice how slippery it is. Notice all the once again, cognitive dissonance. Notice all the ways when you try and make an objective statement. Notice all of the hurt that opens you up to, and notice how the ego swoops in to save the day. It's like, oh, well, like, that really sucks. I wanted to date that person, but now I can't. The brain goes, oh, there's hurt. There's hurt. Da 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 da. Guess what? You're either ugly, so don't worry, man, you never would have had her in the first place because you're so pathetic. Or it's like, da 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 da, guess what? She's not even worth anything. You're way too good for her, man. She's nothing to you. You're so awesome in comparison. Notice how much the ego tries to self-preserve by convincing you how much you need the ego to survive. And so, excuse me, like, and so the thing we need to understand about the ego is that it happens, it is like the bastion of holding up all your beliefs. Ego's a blamer or a reason seeker. Yeah, like the ego's always looking for the blame. It will either blame everyone but yourself, or it'll blame only you. Like, typically when things happen, they happen for a multitude of reasons. But like, you can easily tell when your ego is activated because notice if it's a comparative statement. Notice if it's just what's happening. Like if a scientist could look in the room and see what you see. And like also notice, is this logic protecting me from a certain emotion? And like, this thing doesn't make sense to me. Is the ego trying to come up with an explanation so that way I have a comfy, cozy explanation about this thing and it's not confusing and scary? And so the thing is you guys need to understand that the ego is going to protect you from feeling bad about yourself. So think about this. If we have beliefs about ourselves and we have these self-evidence beliefs like Jordan's talking about, if we have these beliefs and then we decide to turn our lives around for the better, we're no longer going to just fully take these intrusive thoughts as gospel. Think about it. Why is that a bad thing? I'm not saying it's actually a bad thing. I'm saying there's a reason why your brain doesn't want to accept that it can change. There is an adaptive reason. There is an emotion that it is protecting you from to not change. And this is what I'm talking about. Everyone's like, I don't change and I don't understand why. This is a huge reason why you don't change. Anyone know? Anyone know what your brain would be protecting you from? No, it is not these nuts. It's actually something completely different. So if you could have changed, now it's like, oh, I'm so stupid. I could have changed so long ago, but I didn't because I'm dumb. Like, think about like sunken cost fallacy. That's a great way. Funny how you give me the dumbest answer ever and then you proceed to give me the exact answer that I'm looking for. Like, it's sunken cost fallacy. Like, you need to if you've spent your whole life believing something and basing every decision off of that, imagine how terrifying it is to deal with the regret of an entire lifetime of not living your life in the optimal way. That's terrifying. Like, you don't want to deal with one loss. So how terrifying is it to accept that, oh, if I knew this principle earlier, I could have prevented so much pain. And then here comes your ego in to protect you from that pain. It's like, oh, don't worry about it. Oh, sweet, poor little baby. And it will either tell you, you're stupid and you can never change. So don't worry, you could have never changed in the first place. Or it will come and say it will just, what would it say in the other side? Like, it would say oh, look, you can don't worry, you could have never changed and stuff. Or no, having no ego is stupid. You're too good for what? They just want you to get rid of a part of your brain? That's stupid. And then look what those two things conveniently do. Look what they conveniently do. They conveniently shield you from the emotion of the regret. They shield you from the sunken cost fallacy. They shield you from a lifetime of regret because you could have not messed up all those times you messed up in your life if you just didn't give into this part of your brain. And so the final boss of getting rid of your ego is your ego. And just so you guys know, from a technical standpoint, you're always going to have a little bit of ego. If you completely get rid of your ego, congratulations, you're literally enlightened. And so and that happens to a very rare amount of people. I know I still have an ego, but I have the amount of ego that's sufficient for my daily functioning in life. So think about how that relates to everything we've talked about. Cognitive dissonance, your mind always being logical. When did you learn this lesson? Thing that happened versus thing. Think about how hard it is to change when the whole reason you're living life this way is to protect yourself from certain emotions because you can't live with certain emotions like regret and grief. And then you choose actively to avoid it more. You choose to avoid it on purpose. Because now, it's basically hey, how do you stop hurting so much in your life? You get hurt a million times more. That's what's so shitty about what I'm telling you, is that that's what happens. You just is that the thing that your brain is protecting you from, it has a logic because it's protecting you from I'm sure meditating monks have no ego. Yeah, that's true. A lot of meditating monks, they actually those are the people who typically do become enlightened. Is people who because they relinquish all worldly possessions and all that sort of stuff, and because those things facilitate the having of no ego. And things in our modern society activate our ego, so it's really hard to live a life of no ego when that's the case. And so And so I'm sorry to tell you guys, but like in order to get rid of your ego, there's like a lot of pain and grief that comes with accepting that you could have changed things earlier. But there's also a beautiful thing about that. You couldn't have changed things earlier because that in itself is a statement of ego. Oh, I could have changed earlier if I was smarter. Oh, I could have changed earlier. Like, notice how the ego rationalizes why you didn't change. And that's like a true, so like, that's actually like, so actually, yeah, I'm not even going to contest your statement. Like, technically, monks have thoughts. They do. Like, it's not just no thoughts, head empty, but they definitely like, but also their mind doesn't fluctuate. Like, they have thoughts because that's what you need to be like alive, really. But like thoughts are automatic. It's like the way to become a monk is like how you deal with the thoughts that actually come up. It's not actually the cessation of thoughts. But that's a different thing. Like, ego is like think about, so like, I believe in this spiritual concept of karma. So like everything has a cause and effect. So like, and I believe that everyone else believes that, they just don't call it karma. Like, I like, if I get bullied, then my karma, my mental karma, is that I will have to deal with the pain, the mental pain of that later in life. In that sort of way, like, in that way, it is a judgment in itself. I'm going to get ultra spiritual on you guys. So like, if you don't believe me, then like, I'm not going to convince you here and now that this is like how things work, but this is just my belief. Is that like, things could not happen any other way than how they did. Like I talked about with the computer example, your brain simply has a cause and effect of getting new information and then acting on what it believes is the best course of action for you, whether you understand that or not. So I truly believe that if anyone ever gets a good enough reason to do something, your brain actually will partake in that activity. If your brain is doing something that contradicts what you want to do, it probably has a really good reason for doing that, even if you disagree with it. And so in that same way, I think there's a beautiful thing is that like, you kind of don't have to regret anything in life because like, things could never happen a different way. Like, if I have a piece of information that I'm not going to share until a later stream that would help you right now, you can't change that you can't change that I haven't shared that information with you yet, because like, your brain didn't tell me to bring it up because it doesn't know what it is. And so like, things are not good or bad. They just are. They just exist in the way. Your mind can certainly have a response that believes that they are good and or bad. But like, in my belief, like, the universe just simply has a cause and effect relationship. Everything affects one another, and whatever energy cannot be constructed or destroyed. And so like, your brain just has a cause and effect. If it gets this information, it will react this way. And that's not an intelligence thing. That's a human way. Like, that's just what humans do. And so in that same way, your brain just simply didn't have the information that it needed to do this. And so like, weirdly enough, even though I want you to focus on being able to sit with the regret of knowing you could have changed earlier and notice that the ego comes up during moments like that, like, I want you guys to know that like, things couldn't have happened in any other way. Like, they just are. Like, this can of Coke Zero is not good nor bad. It contains no dopamine, the reward chemical, and it also contains no cortisol. It contains no stress chemical. All that exists is my perception of its value and my perception of the quality of it. This Coke Zero is actually good. I actually hate Coke Zero, but like, it's like the orange cream one, and it sounds like it's not that good, but I actually really like it. But that's the thing, is that like, once again, coming back to the Venn diagram, like, this Coke Zero, like, what is this Coke Zero? It's like orange and red, and it has numbers and letters on it, and there's a little cap at the top. But like, what does our brain say it is? It's like, it looks at it and it says, oh, it's bad. And like, once you understand that that is a construction of your mind, and that like the instrument from which you view reality, your brain, is fundamentally filled with cognitive biases, you can understand that I'm like, I don't like this thing, but that does not make it bad. When I drink this, like that sort of thing, like I like it, so it's a better example to say that I like it. I like this thing, but that does not make it good. I can take a drink from it and I can get some dopamine, but that does not make it a good thing for giving me dopamine, because like drugs are considered bad and those give you dopamine. So like, how does that work? It's literally just because of your perception. And so the more that you can get away from your coloring of things and start to focus on like literally scientifically what is reality. This pen is this long. It's like, it's got a little twisty part to it. It has some 2 buttons right here. And like, just notice how much you look at things in life and your brain automatically categorizes it and like simplifies it down to fit in neat little boxes. And then just like start to realize, and like once you can get away from that, your mind is going to stop looking at things and having automatic good and bad reactions to it, and you will feel such a state of peace, because you will understand that every thought you've ever had about a thing is simply like the computer working. But the beautiful thing is that you're not the computer. Like, you're not the computer. Your brain, there's a part of your brain that calculates things. But like, this is what the monks figured out, is that like, we as Americans, or like wherever you're watching from, like they're like at least here in America and like a lot of Western civilization, we have this perception that we are our thoughts, and we are our judgments, and we are the value that we put to other things. Like, that's what makes us us. And the beautiful thing that the monks discovered is that those are actually separate, isolated parts of the brain. And those can be interacted with individually. And so we think that no matter what, we have to perceive things as good or bad. But like, they actually found that like, even if you have a belief that something is good or bad, you can actually grow to turn off that part of your brain and see it for what it is. Like, if this pen pokes me, ow, that hurt. Now my brain sends me a signal and it's like, oh, that's a bad pen. But like the monks realized that it's like, oh, look, the brain is responding to the pain and it is making a judgment to stay away from the pen. The purpose of its doing that is for my survival, because it doesn't want me to get hurt and it wants me to protect me from pain. But I know that this is just a pen. I know that this is just a black 6 inches, and it's got these little extra tips in here. It's got these 2 little buttons that Dylan never uses because he doesn't know how to use his Wacom tablet properly. There's all these little judgments and values we put on everything. Oh, that's such a small button. Oh, that's such a small. So look how dinky that thing is. It's just like, this button is this big. This button is this many inches wide. Like, once you start to see things in a scientific lens rather than emotional lens, your life becomes so calm. It becomes so peaceful. And you'll never want to go back. And you'll slip back into it, but you'll notice how much happier life is when you just see things for what they are rather than what your brain tells you what they are. And part of that just comes from understanding that there is a fundamental separation between what your mind perceives of something versus what literally, scientifically, objectively is happening or existing. Like, just because something creates stress in your brain or pain in your brain does not make that thing a bad thing. It just means that it is a thing that exists that caused that emotional reaction in your brain. But even pain is not an inherently bad thing. Like, people don't get this. Like just because something causes an emotional reaction in your brain to push you away from a course of action, that is not a bad thing. That is just a thing that happens. Like, we'd be screwed without pain. Have you ever met someone who has one of those disorders where like they can't feel pain? It's miserable. Like, but we say that like pain is bad? Like, no, pain's great. It's a good thing that we feel pain. It's adaptive. But no one thinks about that. We just think pain equals bad. And so like I know that a lot of the stuff I'm saying sounds like a bunch of like, you know, it sounds like a bunch of BS. It sounds like a bunch of spiritual voodoo, like, oh, be inner peace. Don't look at your negative emotions. Just look at the positive emotions. I'm saying don't judge reality by your emotions. Just don't. Like, that might sound like a sweeping statement, and I'm kind of hyperbolizing here, but like, because then that leads to you invalidating your emotions by saying, yeah, emotions, get out of here. But just like, see the emotions as they happen and understand that they are not you. They're a separate thing from you. And so you could just see your emotions happening, and instead of being like, oh, I need to act in a way that makes me feel less pain. Just even imagine how broken it is to understand when pain is happening and not be swayed by it automatically. It doesn't control you. Like, that's the life that monks live. That's why they're able to, like, you know, have boiling water poured on them and make the conscious decision to, like, stay still. Because they have full control over what they do. And the beautiful thing is that if they knew it was life-threatening, they could move out of the way because they can sense the pain. It's not like they're numb to the pain or they've closed themselves off from the pain. No, instead they see the pain and then they're like, okay, it's the pain. That's just a signal that is being sent to my brain. Everything that you feel is just your brain getting a signal. And so once you understand that, it's so peaceful to just understand that like nothing is inherently good or bad. It's just the emotions that we attach to the thing. So like I see these people who make all these like super judgmental statements about things and they always are praising everyone's value. You see this mostly on social media and they're like, this thing is so good. Oh, these conservatives are so bad. They're so evil. Oh, these liberals, they're so sensitive. They're so whiny. Go cry in your little echo chambers. We're going to make offensive memes about everything. And I used to be a part of this. But do you think those people are happy? Like, do you think those people are happier than monks? Like, I don't think so. And I respect their right to do that and everything, but like think about how much different your life would be if instead of saying like, oh, this person did this thing, that means they're a bad person because they did a thing that inflicted pain. Instead, you understood this person just did a thing and it caused pain. I can now have my own judgments on that, and those can be separate from everything else. And I can just notice and appraise that separately. Because instead we just go on autopilot our whole life. We just trust our emotions wholeheartedly, or we don't trust them at all and we don't let them get into our brain. We're like, no emotions, get away from us. We don't want you. It doesn't have to be either. Same that I was talking about with Dylan 2. Just look at the existence of your emotions and then just let them exist. Don't give in to every whim that they have, and also don't tell them to screw off and leave. Like, even that, you're making a judgment about your emotions and whether they are good emotions or bad emotions and whether they're allowed in your brain or not. Like, just notice them. Just have awareness. Like, that's all you freaking need. Like, that's seriously what I recommend. And so like, understand that. And then I need you guys to also grieve the loss of the fantasy universe where you had this epiphany sooner. Tolerate regret. So once you're able to feel these emotions come up, understand that then your defense mechanisms will activate. And only when you're able to see the defense mechanism activate, thereby gaining control of it, because then it's no longer habitual because you're looking at it. Like once you see that it's doing the defense mechanism, then you can say, okay, I'm willing to deal with this pain right now. I'm in a safe environment. I can do this. It's going to be painful and it's going to suck, but I'm going to really feel this regret and accept that, like, I really wish I didn't have to deal with all of the pain that I've gone through in my life. But I truly think that it's it couldn't have been any other way. The universality of karma. Everything has a cause and effect. I couldn't have made a different choice because there are reasons my brain made this specific choice. And the gift of hindsight is just that. It's karma. It's now the world affected you in this way. It gave you this data. Now you have regret because you wish you had that data beforehand. But it's not like you can magically know the hindsight. Like, that's what we wish. And so just understand that, like, there's going to be a grieving. There's going to be a kid inside you that has been fighting to protect you. And, like, he's going to cry and say, like, I could have just not been fighting this whole time. I could have been healthy and stuff. And then you just have to be like, I know that you're regretting that we couldn't have fixed this earlier, but it had to happen this way. And it's not fair to you and it's not right. But, like, I wish we could go back and change the past, and we couldn't. We just did the best we could. Even if it wasn't enough, we did the best we could. But what we can do right now is not let that thought process stop us from making progress in the moment, because all that's going to do is lead to more regret down the line. So notice your ego when it comes up and tries to protect you from this by making a value judgment on you because you didn't realize this earlier. Oh, look how stupid you are. Oh, look how pointless this thing. It's either going to devalue this whole process, and notice it when it happens. It's going to devalue this whole process saying, oh, well, this is just a bunch of mumbo jumbo, or, oh, well, if I did this, then it wouldn't make sense because I would need to do this first and everything. Like it's going to have all these reasons that you shouldn't do this. Either because you're so pathetic, or you're too good for it, or you don't understand it, or whatever the hell you want to come up with. You're going to have a million reasons not to do this. Once you can catch that ego and say, that is not me, that is the ego activating, it will give you control and allow you to make the decision on whether or not you want to deal with the pain that the ego is going to punish you with, because it will punish you. And it will tell you that you're making the wrong choice. And if you can outlast that final push of emotions, you'll be good. And so lastly, like, awareness of all these principles, how they relate to you, and catch them when they arise. So it's kind of a cop-out last thing, but genuinely, I think that if there's any part of the process that applies to you, and that, here, I'm going to answer your question at the end, because I'm, like, really close to wrapping up this train of thought, and then I can answer any miscellaneous questions, if that's okay. like awareness. So like what you need to do is any one of these things, most likely most of them on your journey to changing your beliefs, most of these things are likely going to activate because your mind has defense after defense after defense to protect you from the negative emotion that the belief is upholding, is protecting you from. Because your mind has the belief because it doesn't want to deal with the negative emotion. So when you tell it to let the guardrail down, then it's going to lash out at you and it's going to do all these different things. It's going to have so many lines of defense. And so the way you disarm this is that you have the way that you disarm it in general is that you need to gain awareness of the activation of these things when they happen. And as you do that, it will lose power. It will lose the energy as you're able to gain, like I said, like you just need to gain awareness of it as it happens. Be like, oh, that's cognitive dissonance. It's really scary for my brain to think of something that doesn't make sense, so it's trying to come up with a logic that makes sense to it. That's my ego. I'm at danger of feeling a negative emotion, so that's either it building me up or it's it crashing down my ego. And notice that it's trying to protect you from the negative emotion and be like, okay, I get you're trying to protect me. I still want to go. Understand that your brain's always logical. Like if your brain ever says like, oh, like see how stupid you are, understand that no, your brain's actually always logical. It's not always right, but like your brain's like working fine. Like all these defense mechanisms are features. They're not bugs. Like just because we're at a point where we want to move past them, it's good that it's like hypervigilant sometimes. And so, use this process, dive into your past, figure out all this stuff, and then as you're fully understanding how accurate the belief that you hold is, you're going to see the root of it. And as you start to realize that it may be incorrect, all these things are going to come to the surface. All this logic, all these explanations, all this ego, all this stuff all this grief even is going to come to the surface, and it's going to try and protect you from all these things by giving you like a wave of more intense emotions. And as long as you can gain awareness and still keep going, as long as you're in a safe environment, obviously do emotional processing and all that sort of stuff, I think that this is how genuinely you move past having certain beliefs. Because if your brain determines that having the belief protects you from, like, having the belief in protecting you from this big negative emotion that you're trying to avoid is more important than progressing in your life, then it's just going to keep doing the same thing over and over again. And I would assume by the fact that like you asked this question and so many people are interested in how to change your belief, that I would assume that you've understood on some level that it's time for you to move past it. So watch this VOD more than one time if you need to, but like everyone just understand that like all these things are going to come up, and just gain awareness of it and slowly try and chip away at that ego and that cognitive dissonance, and just understand that like your brain's going to try and protect you. It's going to have many lines of defense. And as long as you know its playbook, you'll be able to play on an equal playing ground. And it might not happen overnight. It may take even months or years before this happens, because it's a very, very difficult process. But it's very important that you understand your brain's playbook, and then you can truly start to become an open-minded person and make some progress in your life. So now I'm going to move on to questions. If anyone has any other questions while I'm answering this question, we're going to start. Wow, I did that right at like 2 hours. Oh, I'm so good. I wasn't even aiming for 2 hours, but I'm like, my brain just calculated it. But anyways, so is using optimism going to help suppressing the ego? No. Very good question. So like a lot of people see this sort of stuff and they make the assumption that I'm trying to nudge them towards positivity. A lot of people assume that mental health care is about moving from pessimism to optimism. I don't want you to be either. Like, I think being a pessimist or an optimist is purely independent of your mood. Like, I think there are very happy pessimists, and I think that there are very sad optimists. Like, because but like, how is that true? It's because I don't think that it's because I think that how much being a pessimist or an optimist matters is how much of is I think that only has to do with how much value your mind places on expectations. So like if your mind is very like how do I put this? So if you have a belief that something isn't going to work out, you don't do it. But like here's the beautiful thing is there's a way to get to the point where you do stuff even thinking that it probably won't work out. And it's called detachment. And I can give a little lecture on detachment if you guys want, but it's like the cheat code for life. It's like how to do things without calculating their effectiveness first. Like you can understand the effectiveness, but it's your ability to continue doing something regardless of if your brain tells you that it's not an efficient use of energy. And so a lot of the most stagnant people in life are going to see pessimism, and they're going to be like, well, like there's a reason people are pessimistic, and it's just because it protects us from pain. And also those people are like, well, my expectation is that it's not going to work out, so I'm not going to do it. But I don't know how to say this. Like, I don't do things based on whether I think they're going to work out or not. I do it based on whether I want to do it or not. And like, I generally think that that's a happier way to go through life, because like, how do you like, because like, this is the argument of being a perfectionist. It's like, is being a perfectionist good? It's like, okay, well, not really, because like people describe how it prevents them from doing anything that's not justifiably perfect. And so the reason it feels so freeing and the reason it's not as idiotic as it may sound is because like my brain would often come up with things, like a lot of reasons to not do something. Like often when people don't do anything in life, they have a lot of reasons to not do things because like, oh, it wouldn't work out. It wouldn't do this thing. But like, I don't know how to say this. Like being a pessimist or an optimist has no bearing on whether or not I stream today, because like, I don't think this stream is going to blow up. Like if I was a betting man and I had to be like, do I really think that I'm actually going to end up being like a streamer that gets popular? Like, no. I don't think so. Like I could be wrong, but like I'm betting that the answer is no. But like the beautiful thing about this is that I can think, because I don't base what I do on the likelihood of success, I'm able to do things regardless of whether I'm pessimistic or optimistic. So that's the important thing, is that like, if you calculate the risk reward and cost benefit analysis of everything that you do because you're so resistant to wasting energy, then you're not going to do anything in life, because likely you're probably a pessimist and you probably don't do anything because you've determined that all of those things have a potential to be a waste of time. And so you don't do them. And then like, me being a pessimist has nothing to do with whether or not I do something. Because pessimism and optimism isn't about your attitude towards something. It's about how likely your mental skewing of how likely you think something is to succeed. But like, success rates don't matter to me. And so like, they have no bearing on my ego. So like, I would say that like, if you try and lean more towards optimism by being like, oh no, maybe people do think that I'm good. What is that? That's ego. Like if you say like, oh no, people probably think I'm awesome because I am awesome. Like, saying that you're awesome and saying that you're shit are like two equally bad statements from a yogic perspective. They are both statements of the ego, and they will both create. Because they are inherently defense mechanisms, I would say if you base your life off of how you perceive yourself as a person, I would really dig into your ego and understand, when did you start believing that you were this type of person? Because the ego is not real. It's a construction. It's a part of our brain that rationalizes behaviors. But like so many people, like I don't consider myself a chess player because I don't play chess all the time. But a lot of people will be like, oh, well, I'm not a chess player, so I'm not going to try and learn how to play chess because that's not me. Like, this is so, like, it's so idiotic when you think about it. I don't mean to be insensitive, but, like, think about how many people base their calling in life off of something that they did mildly successfully when they were, like, a child. Like, think about that. Like, so it's like, how do you know that you're, like, a pianist? It's like, because I've been playing piano since I was 5. And it's like, okay, cool. Why don't you learn chess? It's like, well, because I'm a pianist. I'm not a chess player. It's like, why aren't you a chess player? It's like, because I haven't been doing it since I was 5. And I'm like, oh, okay. So you don't do anything that you haven't been doing since you were 5? Because that means you're destined to not be good at it? Like, I don't understand. Like, what does that mean? Like, I didn't start streaming because I'm a streamer. I started streaming because I wanted to start streaming. Like, I didn't ego identify as like a streamer. Does that make sense? Like, I think it's crazy that we base what we do in life. I don't think this part is crazy. I don't think it's crazy that we base things on cost-benefit analysis in our brain. I think that's very functional and it makes sense, but I think it leads to people being very, very limited in life if they can't look at that part of their brain with scrutiny. But I think it's crazy in our life how we base what we do off of our identity, off of our ego, off of, I'm not the type of person to do that. You're not the type of person to do anything. Like, you just did stuff automatically, and then your brain rationalized it as, oh, you did that because you're this sort of person. Like, that's why you were magnetically pulled to this sort of thing. But, like, people, when they understand that that's just a bunch of BS, can, like, expand their range and just think about it. Like, think about how many things you want to do that you don't do because your brain just says, like, oh, well, you're not the type of person to do that. Or, oh, you're not good enough to do that. Or you're not bad enough to do that. Nothing is good or bad or not compatible about what you are. Just, if you want to do something, understand that it has a likelihood to fail or whatever, because most things do. But if you still want to do it, then just do it. Like quit giving think about how limited of a life you leave if you need a good enough reason to do everything. I wouldn't be streaming right now. Like, if I needed a good enough reason, let's spend time in my day that I could have been door dashing most likely. So I'm actually kind of losing money by doing it. I have no viewers. It's such a niche category that like no one's going to probably tune in and all this sort of stuff. Like, a logical person who's like super caught up in their own head and claims to be like way more efficient than me wouldn't be streaming. But then people look at me on the other end of the lane and they're just like, oh, you're so inspirational. Like, it's crazy how you can just stream, even though like it's crazy how you have the confidence to stream. Like, how did you know you'd be good at streaming right away? And I'm just like, I don't know if I'm even good at streaming now. All I do is just pick an activity that I'm inclined to do, and then I do the best that I can. Like, even that idea of like, oh, how did you know you'd be good at this thing? Do you guys get how that comes from this super toxic and limiting part of your brain that's like, oh, so you must obviously also only do things if they're absolutely gonna work out, right? Like, no, that's crazy. So like, I don't like, it runs so counter to everything we know about making good decisions in life. So, like, I'm not saying, like, go get a DUI because I'm just focused on doing the best I can drunk driving. Like, obviously, there's a level of logic you got to put into it. But, like, you know, like, I wouldn't quit DoorDashing altogether to stream because I understand that logically I need to. But find the areas in your life where you have time to spare and then ask yourself, do I want to live life in the safe route, which is a totally valid option. I just find that people aren't very happy in that lane. Or do you want to, like, be adventurous and, like, do things even if they have a chance of failing? Because, like, that's typically how successful people go about things, is that they're very tolerant of failure. So really, I want you to, like, look at your life and understand how much of your life is you avoiding failure by needing a good enough reason to do something. How much is you avoiding the negative connotations of trying something and failing at it? And, like, once you're okay with failure, once you're not, like, running from that beast inside you that tells you that you're, like, stupid and, like, oh, look, I was right, you failed, I was right about everything. Once you just understand that that's just a part of your brain that wants to protect you from hurt and it's not, like, real, your life becomes free. Like, life becomes a sandbox game. Like, I love using that phrase. Like, life becomes a sandbox game. It's no longer a survival horror because because, like, now, even if I waste my time, quote unquote, all these people who are super overly efficient are going to get all in their head and be like, oh, see, my way of life is better. I proved that you're living life inefficiently. Once again, what have we been talking about here? Like, just because you do something and it's inefficient, our brain attaches meaning to that. We say, oh, that's bad. And it's doing that because it wants to push you in a certain direction. But, like, I've already achieved things that I want to achieve in life. So, like, I'm okay with wasting some time if it means that I'm just doing stuff that I want to do. I just live my life doing stuff that I feel like doing. So, even if I fail, I think someone pointing that out and saying, oh, haha, look how little viewers you got. Oh, are you sad? I think that says a lot more about how much weight they put on success to failure ratios than me. Because, like, I'm having a good time, and, like, whether or not I have 3 viewers or 100,000 viewers, like this is just a way I want to spend my time, is taking that chance and getting what I got out of it anyways. Even if it ends up failing, I can still get a certain amount out of it. And the failure does not have to be bad. It does not have to be a negative connotation to it. That is simply something that the mind does. And it's kind of something that, like, we don't really acknowledge until we felt it. Like, people who have felt the things that I'm feeling get it. Like, they get why I'm saying this stuff, but a lot of people will see this and, like, they're so caught up in their logic that they forgot how to live life. Like, they just forgot how to, like, take risks and do things that could fail and, like, not limit themselves to things that have, like, a good enough chance of succeeding. Like, just try everything. Like, it's fine. It's way more efficient than choosing to do none of the above and do, like, a really safe option, like scrolling, because, like, you were afraid to do something and fail. So in short, I do think that optimism, I don't think optimism helps suppress the ego. I think what helps suppressing the ego is being comfortable with failure, regardless of whether or not you logically think it will succeed or not. I think the ego comes from protecting you from from the bad feelings that failure brings about. So I think the way you get a handle on that is accepting failure and understanding that failure is not an inherently bad thing. So, if we don't have any questions, I'm feeling really good. Thank you so much, Jordan, for this question. This was fantastic. This is one of my favorite streams so far. I had a really, really good time, and thank you. It's just Medjim, once again, if I'm ever mispronouncing that. Thank you for being such an active participant, and thank you, Nello, also. But yeah, we had some super good questions. and really, I think, contributed, like, especially like the convincing someone really helped us, like, really deep dive into like how to treat your own emotions and beliefs and how to treat other people's. So if you guys, once again, I end every stream with this. If you want to come on call, I'm down to talk with people, like a talk show sort of thing. We can talk about psychology stuff. It can be deep or not deep. I don't care. I just like to talk about psychology stuff. So you could ask me questions in person. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about. And then you can also just DM me questions or ask them in chat. I've also got a YouTube channel. If you guys want to comment on that one and go follow that, it should be linked in my Twitch. Should be linked to my Twitch. And then and yeah. So just give me more questions and tell me if you want to come on stream. And yeah, thanks a lot everyone for showing up. And I'll see you next time I stream.